Hello everyone. Today in this lecture, I'll be talking about for loop, while loop, and do while loop. So first of all, let's talk about. So first of all, let's talk about for loop. For loop is a controlled flow statement with a specific number of iterations. Or it works by running a section of code repeatedly until a certain condition is satisfied. For loop is used when the number of iteration is already known to the programmer. These are the conditions when we can use for loop. Here's the syntax of for loop. This is the initial condition, or we can say this is the initial point. This is the final, or we can say the condition which in each iteration the compiler check, and this is the incremental condition statement here. And this is our block of code. We'll be implementing all these in our Visual Studio Code later in this video. For now, let's talk about for loop. The flowchart of for loop. Here we have a given condition inside our for loop brackets, and let's say that in the first iteration, uh, the compiler runs the code and then check the condition. If it is false, then it terminates the code, while if it is true, then it again run the code iteratively. So that's how for loop work. Now let's talk about while loop. While loop is also a flow statement. While loop is also a controlled flow statement, which allows code to be executed repeatedly based on a given Boolean condition. We can think of while loop as repeated if statements. We use while loop when we do not know how many iterations we want to run our code, and if we are clear about that we want to run our code at this much time, then we use for loop at that time. Here's the syntax of while loop. Here's the syntax of while loop. Here in the header we write the condition, and we write our code to which we want to execute here, and this loop runs till this condition becomes false. As far as this condition is true, the loop will run iteratively. So that's how while loop work. We'll also implement this in our Visual Studio Code later in this video. So now let's move forward and talk about do while loop. Do while loop is pretty much the same as while loop. The only difference is in while loop, first of all, the compiler check the condition and then run the code, while in do while loop, it first of all run the code for the first time, which is inside our curly braces, and then check the condition. So that's the difference between while and do while loop. Like as I said, same as while loop, it's also a control flow statement that executes a block of code and then either repeats the block or exits the loop depending upon given condition, given Boolean condition inside a while loop. If the Boolean condition is true inside the while loop, then it executes the code which is inside our curly braces. Otherwise, it terminates from the code. So here's a simple syntax of our do while loop. Now let's go to our Visual Studio and see how we can implement all these in our Visual Studio Code, and see practically how we can use these loops to write an algorithm using Java programming language. Now, so we are here in our Visual Studio Code. Now let's first of all create a new file, and let's name it loops lecture.java. Let's save it. Loop lecture.java. Now let's write our main function, public static void main string arguments, and now let's see how. Let's suppose we are given a condition, we are given a problem to print numbers from 1 to 10. So how we can use for loop to print numbers from 1 to 10? Here's a simple step. For int I is equals to 0, this is the initialization point, I is less than or equals to 10, we'll be printing numbers uh, from 0 to 10, and we'll increment I in each iteration. And inside our brackets we'll write system.out I. Now if you run the code, if you run the code, we can see that here uh, a number from 0 have been printed here. Also now let's talk about while loop, uh, how we can solve the same problem, like how we can print numbers from 1 to 10 using while loop. While loop. So we'll first of all initialize our variable first, int I is equals to 0, while I is less than or equals to 10. First of all, the compiler will check the condition inside the while loop. If it's true, then it will execute the code which is inside our braces. So let's write this, and we'll also be incrementing our variable by 1 in each iteration. So now let's run it. Here you can see that the number from 0 to 10 have been printed. So that's how we use while loop to solve problems in Java language and in other programming languages as well. Now let's remove this one, and let's talk about do while loop. I'll talk now let's see how we can use our do while loop to solve the same problem. So do system.out I, and then iterate I by 1 in each step. I forgot to initialize I, and then check the condition inside while loop. Set while if it's less than or equals to 10. Now let's run the code and see if it's working. Here you can see numbers from 0 to 10 have been printed. So that's how we use with do while loop in Java, and we use the same syntax in C++ as well. So that's all for today. We learned about for loop, while loop, and do while loop. We'll see you in the next lecture with more concepts about Java programming language. Till then, keep learning and keep improving yourself. Thank you.